Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, and especially to my patrons and channel members. I have as my guest today, I knew I was going to say this wrong, is
It's okay.
Cynane Shay. Hello, Cynane.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to meet you.
Cynane is working on a book called Taking Off the Tinfoil Hat. And the book is not finished yet, and it is not available yet. So that's why there is no link to purchase the book in the description. But there is a link to Cynane's website. And so when the book does become available, you can find it there. Cynane, tell us a little bit about your book and what you're writing.
Yeah, sure. So, the working title, and it could change, is Taking Off the Tinfoil Hat. And it's part memoir and part like deconstruction memoir, part kind of history, journalism, nonfiction. So basically, uh, I deconstructed because of conspiracy theories post 2020. And I think that a lot of people had very similar experiences to me. And so, just kind of the history of white evangelical nationalism, and these conspiracy theories that like built up through the lens of like my life, because I feel like I'm just like very much like a stereotypical test case for all of this craziness. So that's the book.
Okay, I was kind of trying to bring up your audio level just a bit.
Oh, sorry.
If someone in the chat could let me know, is Sinane's audio level okay, or does she sound a little unbalanced with me? And I'm not sure that what I just did helped or maybe made it worse. I may have actually brought up my level rather than yours. I have a little bit of difficulty with that.
Um,
Sandy says your level was a little low.
I scooted a little bit closer. Is this better?
Okay, there we go. Very good.
Okay.
Okay. So, um, let's start with your background. You were raised in what kind of church were you raised in?
So it's kind of a mix. I kind of call myself like a basic bitch evangelical because it was a lot of like the non-denominational Protestant evangelicalism. Calvary Chapel, it's kind of like a Starbucks of Protestant churches because they have it's like a chain church, like 1,800 plus congregations all over the world, but mostly in the United States. And then and the theology for what I have found most non-denominational churches to be is it's very much just like Southern Baptist, but with like rock music. And then also Southern Baptist, the church that I went to for youth group and the church that my older family relatives attended was a Southern Baptist church. And then there was a very unpleasant undercurrent of IBLP throughout my community, which is the Institute in Basic Life Principles cult that was run by Bill Gothard. So a lot of the families that we were friends with, the kids that I was in youth group and private Christian school and all of these things with, were going to like IBLP summer camps. We're using the IBLP homeschooling curriculum. And like those parents were the ones who were running our Bible studies and teaching in our school. And, so the influence was very much there, even though my family was not directly involved with Bill Gothard in any way. Um, so, yeah, and then when I was an undergrad, the church that we went to was a little bit more Pentecostal. Um, and so, I feel like I kind of got like a smattering of, you know, Protestant evangelicalism.
Now, the IBLP, that is the denomination of the Duggards.
Yeah.
Um, so were there families in your church that were in the quiverful movement?
Yes. Not my family again. But the quiverful movement, the IBLP movement, there were a couple others that were very similar, basically taught that birth control is morally wrong and that you should have as many children as God will bless you with. So there were multiple families that we knew growing up who had like 6 to 8 kids. The girls that I grew up with were going to these IBLP summer camps. And again, like I never went to one, but I grew up in a very insulated, very controlled environment. We went to a private Christian school. All of my friends either went there or were homeschooled. We did not know anybody who was not a Christian, who was not a Republican. And so all of the girls that I knew growing up, it was a small circle, were going to IBLP summer camps and things. And I remember them coming back with photos, like selfies, back when like selfies had basically just been invented, um, with the Duggar girls, with
Oh,
some of,
wow.
yeah, with the Duggar sisters, because they were going to these camps and things. And like they were showing them off. Like it was super cool that they were taking photos with like Duggar girls. And that made them like really popular. So, yeah, and I mean, I guess for anybody who doesn't know, the Shiny Happy People documentary on Amazon Prime has an incredible breakdown of what IBLP was, and how incredibly abusive and toxic it was. But yeah, so very, very like 2 degrees of Kevin Bacon between me and like actual Duggars.
Okay. Okay. Now, did you see the kinds of things that were abusive in the IBLP going on in your church?
Um, that's a really good question. Um, yes and no, kind of. So when I was little, I feel like I either didn't really see it or I didn't really know what it was.
Mhm.
And then as I got older, like I heard about things with people that I knew, like very intimately, that were like super messed up. So, I have a very close friend who had kind of an abusive father, and and this was back when we were in like second grade, fourth grade, like very, very small. So I didn't know any about any of this at the time. But her parents separated because the father was abusive, and the whole church sided with the father and
Mhm.
basically harassed the mother, like chasing
Mhm.
her down the street, shouting out of car windows, telling her that she was not following God's plan, and that she needed to be submissive to her abusive husband.
Right.
And my friend was treated differently at the private Christian school that we went to. And I didn't realize that as a fourth grader, even on through like middle school and stuff. But since then, she's told me things that, because she had a single mother, like she was treated differently. And then there are also like cases of actual like sexual abuse and things that have come up since then. One of the families that was involved in a lot of the IBLP stuff and in the private Christian school that we went to and all these church things that we did, they had their son, um, after the fact, like years later, it was discovered that he had been molesting family members. And instead of reporting that to the police or taking him to like a legitimate counselor or doing any of those things, they swept it under the rug. They found a preacher for him to talk to, and that was all that happened.
Mhm.
And, just like horror stories. And, in my own experience, I feel like now, you read Jesus and John Wayne, you read hashtag church too, you hear all of these accounts of like purity culture horror stories, all of the girls who grew up in IBLP who were actually abused, and like groomed by Bill Gothard himself. I feel I am fortunate to have made it out of purity culture without any of those experiences myself. But
Mhm.
there was another guy in undergrad at the church that I was going to, and these are just horrible, horrible stories. But I distinctly remember him sitting down with me and my roommate, and we're like 19 years old. He and his friend are like a little bit older than us, maybe like 21, 22, and like I don't know what they thought they were doing. They were mansplaining. They were like counseling us, because they were older, and men, to tell us that like it was better to get married really, really quickly, to date somebody and get married within a couple months, weeks or months. That's better than to live in lust and to live in sin. And I'm just like, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Like, maybe not. Let's not get married after weeks. Okay. I'm not going to make a life changing decision because, like, you can't keep it in your pants. Maybe try some self control, my guy. But anyway, he went on to, he dated a girl, got married within like 2 or 3 months. And again, just an absolute horror story. So, like, trigger warning, to everybody. But, they immediately had a baby. They immediately had a second baby. This all happened, I think, before I even graduated undergrad, you know? So, like, that was freshman year when we had that conversation. Before I graduated, he had 2 kids, and his wife went to work one day, and he was playing video games, and the baby was in in a high chair, and he got annoyed that the baby was crying, and distracting him from his video games, and he, like, kicked over the high chair and caused brain damage to his child. Called the, took the kid to the emergency room. They asked, like, what happened. He tried to lie about it. And then eventually he confessed because social workers got involved, and then he took his own life, in prison. So, or in jail. But, you know, the fruit of these ideologies and the theology and the patriarchy that they teach, and the male headship and the complementarianism, and the umbrellas of authority from Bill Gothard, the fruit of all of these things the fruit of an imbalanced power structure is abuse for the women and the children. And a lot of, rightfully so, they absolutely focus on, like, what happened, like, the perspective of women in these circles. But it's also just as damaging and horrific for the men, because they are
Yeah.
forced to be tiny household gods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it warps their understanding of relationships and sex and, all these other things. And so, like, of course you end up in these horrible situations. So yes, not in my exactly personal life, but
Mm-hmm.
once I think it was, like, right after I read Jesus and John Wayne, because she details all of these, like, horror stories of people growing up in these systems. I thought about my own history and the people that I knew, and I realized that I was surrounded by these horrible stories.
We have a comment here from the Hollywood sign is proof of the Nephilim, who says, remember, masturbation is a sin.
Yeah.
The R word is just a property crime.
Yes.
Yeah, that is something that I have faced, and I've mentioned it a couple of times that when I was a believer, I tried to convince myself that I'm not a person. My husband is the person, and I'm here to serve him.
Oh my God.
I'm not a person. And yeah, that's how far I went with it.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that, something that I've been kind of, like, I'm writing the chapter on purity culture right now, and, like, really in a chapter trying to say something really profound about it. There's just, I could write volumes, but, I'm kind of, I think I'm going to try to frame it as, if you're familiar with, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
mhm, mhm.
physical needs, like, basically, like, social needs, and then, like, kind of spiritual needs. And, what they did to us, to the girls in these systems, is they consumed us in every single one of those spheres, because in a patriarchal system, your physical needs, your safety, your food, your finances are dependent on you conforming to the system and having a man who's going to take care of you. Your social standing is also based on, marrying a Christian husband and having Christian children, and, like, that is how you get respect in this system. And then, the spiritual higher echelon of this, like, your personal fulfillment, they tell you that this is, God's will for you, that God is
Yes.
going to send you a mail ordered husband, and that if you have prolonged eye contact, you have damaged your soul. So it is damaging on every single level that you can possibly think of.
Now, you said when you were an undergrad, you started going to a Pentecostal church?
Um, so when I went to undergrad, I lived with a girl from my hometown. I'd known her since kindergarten. We went to the same private Christian school for elementary and middle school. Um, and we lived together for all 4 years, very much on the same page, indoctrinated to the same in the same way. And we were like, we need to find a church, like we have to go to a church. And we tried out a bunch of different places, and I think they had like a table, how they like, they do their street evangelism like on college campuses. They had a table, and we like bought their flyer, and then like we went to their church. And they had a like college age youth night
Hmm.
on like Friday nights or something that was not that had a different pastor. And that for me was okay, and it wasn't that Pentecostal. We tried going a couple times on Sunday mornings with their main pastor, and that was much more Pentecostal. Like,
Mm.
one service we went to was like the like hand on the forehead, like Holy Spirit, Jesus in the name of knock you on the floor, hoo-ah. And for me, like that was like, this is a bit much. And not that I denied, not that I believed that it wasn't true or right, because I had been taught, to try to speak in tongues and that healing was possible. And so, I wasn't like biased against this. It was a bit much for me. So, um, there was a little bit of a Pentecostal flair, but we went to the more normal Friday night service.
I know exactly what you mean because I attended an Assemblies of God church for a short period of time. And I came away saying, that's not for me. That's a style of worship that I'm just not comfortable with. But I never denied that it was real. I never denied that, this was their way of belief, just that it wasn't my cup of tea.
Yeah. I did take a little bit of offense and like bristle at, like, they were very prosperity gospel. They were very name it and claim
Mm.
it. They were upset, like the main pastor would spend like 15 to 20 minutes of every Sunday with a tithing sermon to try to get you to
Mhm.
give money. Um, and I remember they had this one service where they were doing like a Bible study on like Wednesday nights you could sign up for. They had a book that they were going to read through, and it was talking about circle prayer.
Mhm.
And if you want something, you draw a circle around it, like with chalk. And then you pray over the circle, and like God would give it to you. And that this was biblical because of some Bible verse that they had like pulled out of somewhere. And, like if you wanted a new car, like go to the car dealership and draw a chalk circle around the car you want and like pray over it, and God would like somehow like grant this to you. That for me, I was just like, this is bullshit. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, but other than that, I was, very much indoctrinated.
Okay. Now, I know you got into some conspiracy theories. Was that during your undergrad years or did that come later?
Um, I so I didn't really believe the conspiracy theories myself.
Okay.
There was like a couple, but they were very small.
Mhm.
Just because it was like normalized. But so like growing up, my family was very much like on the white Christian nationalist scale. They were evangelicals. They sent us to a private Christian school because they wanted us to be like evangelicals. But um, I feel like my family was not involved in IBLP, maybe a little bit more on the white nationalist side, white Christian nationalists. They were very much white nationalists. They fell a lot more for the political conspiracy theories and things. My mother is obsessed with the rapture, which is its own conspiracy theory. Um, but they were, when Obama became the president, was really when I kind of, because I think that was around the time when I was in high school, and so I was old enough that I can actually like remember this a little bit better. They lost their minds. They were, my family's racist, but they got like super racist, or the whole Islamophobia post 9/11, racism, like they were right on board for that. And when Obama became the president, a lot of Islamophobic racism. He was a secret Muslim. He had infiltrated the country from the highest level in order to like undermine our Judeo-Christian principles. He was born in Kenya. They were like birtherism conspiracy theorists. And I'm in high school. I don't know anything about politics. I am completely politically ignorant. And my parents, who I trust implicitly, and all of their friends and everybody that I know who's an adult is saying the same stuff. And so I was just like, I don't know. Okay. Like, I guess maybe Obama was born in Kenya. I don't know. I wasn't like running around, like, talking to people on the high school campus about it, like arguing with people or whatever. But, I do remember like one kid talking to me about it, and he actually knew what was going on and I didn't. And I was just like, well, I don't know. Like, my dad said he wasn't born in the US, like, and they got a lot more guns. I'm sure we always had guns, but I feel like it was during the Obama years that they started to get a lot more.
Mm.
Like they have like lockers and stuff full of them now, like safes and things. And they, when Obama turned over to Trump, they were convinced that he was not going to relinquish power, that he was going to declare himself to be like the Muslim king of the United States. And this is actually traumatic, but it was January of 2017, and it was like the week that Obama was going to shift over to Trump. I work for the military, and so I was in a military training program. I'm not in the military. I'm a civilian contractor, but in my apartment complex, I shared a landing with a naval officer who was in the same program as me. And this kid's like maybe 22 years old. All right. So he's not like high up or anything. He's in the same training program that I'm in. My parents come to visit, and they corner this kid in a stairwell, and they're old people love to talk to strangers. And I was just like, whatever, they're your problem for 5 minutes. And then my mom just out of nowhere, I had never heard this before. She had never hinted at anything like this before. So all of a sudden goes, I have a question for you. I saw this thing on YouTube. Is it true? Because like you're a naval officer. Is it true that when Obama refuses to relinquish power and declares himself to be the dictator of the United States, that the seat of power for true America shifts to the chief nuclear admiral, and that's the guy who gets to nuke the White House?
Oh, brother. Oh, my goodness.
And I'm literally, my mouth is open. Like, he's 22 years old. I was like, do you honestly believe that this man has the need to know for that kind of thing? Number one. Now, like, there's just so much wrong with this. And he was so kind. He had this thick Texas accent, and he was just like, well, ma'am, I don't rightly know. And like, and that was like the end of the conversation. And I like rushed my parents into my apartment, and I was like, what are you doing? Like I'm going to get fired. Like, you can't be saying these crazy things. And they were just like, you don't know what's going on. How dare you talk to us with that tone? That's so disrespectful, like whatever. And I was just like, oh my God, they've lost their minds. And so like, there were some things that like, because I didn't know anything about politics, I was just like, okay, maybe. Some things I was like, no, that's insane. But the 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 point was that I kind of figured that either they know something that I don't know because I don't know anything about politics, or they're just old people and they believe some crazy things, and like it's not that big of a deal. They can believe whatever they want. But I didn't really think that it was a problem. Until it became a problem. So,
Mm.
uh,
Before you go there, I've got a comment that I've been holding for
yeah.
a while that goes back to something you said earlier. So let's go ahead and bring that up before we move on, which was, is that what coroners are doing with chalk outlines? You mentioned the drawing the circle around.
Yeah.
Maybe the coroners are trying to
Yeah.
bring the person back to life.
Oh my God. I saw another comment where it was like, it sounded very pagan ritualistic. And I thought the same thing at the time. I was like, this is like, superstitious nonsense, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, so the conspiracy theories became problematic at what point?
Embarrassingly late, I will say. Oh, and one of the other conspiracy theories that I like kind of fell for was I was like a freshman in undergrad, so I was like 18 or 19 years old, and there was a very convincing YouTube video that said um, Beyonce was possessed by a demon named Sasha Fierce, and I was just like, oh, I don't know, because like I had been taught my entire life growing up that like secular anything was demonic, you know, like secular music was demonic, and like you know, Harry Potter is the devil. And, you know, so like the YouTube video said that like Beyonce was possessed by a demon, and it had like all these clips and stuff. And I was just like, I don't know. I didn't stop listening to Beyonce, but, but I was just like, I had a complex about it. I was like, I felt a little bit guilty. Um, I'm sorry,
When I was
Beyonce.
growing up, it was Kiss and Mick Jagger.
Not
They
Mick
were the
Jagger.
possessed ones.
Oh my God. Um, yeah, but
Oh, and Osborne, Ozzy
oh,
Osbourne.
I could see that one. I'll give them that one. Um, but it wasn't until 2020. I was very much indoctrinated, very much an evangelical, very serious about my faith. I did not, when I moved for work, like after undergrad, I church hopped a little bit, like trying to find a new church.
Hmm.
And I worked a rotating shift schedule, so it was very hard for me. I didn't have like every Sunday off, or like I'd be on night shift or something. So like that was like a big thing where I kind of didn't go to church for a while. But then like they also all bugged me. They, you know, like the happy clappy, like pastor's daughter or like youth minister's wife or like some bubbly woman would always like approach you when you came in and be like, oh my God, like let's be best friends, blah, 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 blah. And you know, and I thought that it was just because I'm like an engineer, where like that would annoy me. And I'd just be like, small talk or like whatever. Like I'm already a Christian, like you can calm down. Um, but I think like looking back now, I kind of realized that like the fakeness of it all was like grating me.
Hmm.
The forced positivity and stuff.
Mm.
And so I never found like a home church. Um, and then 2020 happened. So I'd already kind of been out of it for like a little bit, hadn't been going to church regularly, and
Hmm.
then 2020. And it didn't hit me until the summer of 2020. So that was the first year of the pandemic. It was during the first summer spike. And my best friend, I call her Kathy. That's not her real name. But Kathy, that bitch, um, had been best friends with her since we were 12 years old, like best friends. I went to youth group with her, like we went to all of our Christian Bible summer camps together. Her family was one of the more IBLP involved families that I knew. Like I remember seeing Bill Gothard VHS tapes at her house. When I went to undergrad, I did nuclear engineering. She went to teach English in Taiwan through an IBLP program, because they had multiple like international missions and things. So she was like fairly like really into it, and she was never a conspiracy theorist. People ask me this all the time. Like she wasn't a conspiracy theorist. She didn't really have any crazy beliefs. We were very much on the same page. Like we were the same. Except the one thing was that she was like obsessed with demons. Like she thought that like everything was demonic. Like we have 3 bars in our hometown, and I didn't drink alcohol until I turned 21. Um, she would not drink alcohol at all. And I was like, Jesus made wine, so like I think it's fine. But she was convinced that like one of the 3 bars in our hometown was possessed by demons. She like had been to Asia, and she thought that like certain things that she had bought at markets were possessed by demons.
Mm.
And I was just like, I don't know, but like, you know, maybe she just has a spiritual gift for it that I don't have. And so I was just like, okay. Um, but she wasn't a conspiracy theorist. And then in 2020, she had been planning to visit some family in North Carolina for like a year, and she had asked if she could stay with us as for like a free place to stay. And then the pandemic hit, and she still went. And I told her, I was like, you can still stay with us if you need a free place to stay, but please understand that I am an essential worker. I'm still going to work every day. I see a lot of people. I'm potentially exposed. So, like, there's a risk here. And normally, when people come to visit, we do the whole tourist thing. We go to the restaurants and the sightseeing and all this stuff. We're not going to be able to do that because of the panorama. And she was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. She comes to stay. The first thing that she says when she gets out of the car is, do I need a face mask? And I was just like, yeah, obviously. And she was like, oh, haha, this is the first time I've ever worn a face mask in July. And then she said something like, oh, we don't wear face masks in Florida. And I was just like, who is we? Like, I'm pretty sure you do. And you have to, it's very hard for me to tell this story now with the hindsight that we have, because
Mhm.
like obviously we know what that means now. It's like very QAnon related, it's very conspiracy theory, anti-mask, anti-vax. At the time, she was one of the first people that I'd ever talked to who was like vaccine resistant. Like these were weird things for her to say. And so I would just kind of like, I was like, okay, I thought it was like a weird comment to make, but we just like moved on. Then she spent the whole weekend, the whole like 2 days that she was with us, making fun of us for taking COVID seriously. And her other best friend, who was a girl that she had met while she was teaching English in Taiwan. So this is a girl that was raised much more IBLP related. I had met her once, and I had seen on her social media, on her Instagram stories, she was, and the phrase I used at the time was like, it looks like she's off the deep end. Like,
Mm.
what's
Mhm.
going on with your friend? Like, should we be worried?
Mhm.
Because she was talking about, I didn't know what it meant. She was talking about pedophilia for some reason, talking about 5G radiation, patriots, talking about how face masks were slavery, how face masks were child abuse. The vaccine was not out yet, but talk, of course, and the biggest thing was that these are biblical end times, that like Jesus Christ is coming back any day now, that this is end times apocalypse, that there's going to be a communist wave that overtakes the United States. And she was like talking about leaving the country, like just insane. And I tell Kathy, I'm like, yo, like, what's going on? And Kathy was just like not bothered. She was just like, oh, you don't believe in any conspiracy theories? And I was just like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? Like, was there a second shooter for JFK? I don't know, but like, like, what does that mean? And so she leaves, and the next day, she sent me a voice message that changed my life. Like, this was the moment, this was the thing that completely changed the trajectory of my life. Was she sent me a voice message, and she said, hey, like, because we were talking about conspiracy theories yesterday, I thought you would find this interesting. My best friend from this church that she goes to in our hometown, and the church is very, her new church is like Pentecostal. Like, it's a very Pentecostal church. I know multiple families who go to this church because it is a small town. And she was like, my best friend from this church believes that when the vaccines come out, they're going to be full of secret metal. And then the metal in your blood is going to interact with 5G radiation to control your mind, to mind control, to force you to vote Democrat or to kill you. She wasn't sure which one. And at first, I was like, that's hilarious. Like, oh my God, your friend found this thing on the internet. Like, that's so wild. And then she was like, no, she really believes this. And I lost my shit. It was a text message, so I've reread this, and like verbatim I was like, you need to, I have a degree in nuclear engineering and you're telling me that 5G radiation is going to control my mind. I was like, you need to question all of your life choices for tolerating the existence of this person, let alone being friends with them. And if anybody other than me says the word radiation to you, you need to slap them and walk away. And then I said something to the effect of calling her friend a smooth brain. And this bitch had the audacity to be offended by that. Her only response to this whole thing was like, I think that's a bit harsh. And I was like, you don't get to tell me that 5G radiation is going to control my mind and expect me not to react with violence. Like, we've met. That's insane. So at this point, I was like, Kathy's my age. Kathy's not my boomer parents. Kathy is like a normal, attractive, young person, and something is very wrong. You know, her Instagram friend is not the only issue. Kathy is a part of the issue. Like, what is going on? And when I started paying attention, I saw it everywhere. My mom started sending me a bunch of videos with like Simone Gold from the America's Frontline Doctors Association, the people who like push the hydroxychloroquine conspiracy theory. My other friend's mom sent me a bunch of videos of a pastor standing at a pulpit preaching about how Bill Gates and George Soros are running some sort of satanic cabal. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah. And then, you know, it was everywhere. It was on all of the social media feeds. I started to see it everywhere, and I eventually figured out that it was QAnon. You know, I had a name to put to it, and I did a deep dive into QAnon to figure out what is it, because Kathy was my best friend, like sister, family. And I was like, I gotta understand what's going on. I figured out everything about QAnon, and I went back to her and I was just like, I understand all of your friends' Instagram posts now. Like, it's QAnon. It's so funny. Like, people think Hillary Clinton is eating babies. LOL. Like, this was a text message.
Hmm.
And you know, just like, if anything, you would think that that would like start a conversation, be like, "Oh wow, that's crazy." Um but she just like one word responses, like one line responses, like would not even engage in a conversation, and I was just like, what is happening? And the week after Kathy visited, um, my husband proposed. And so then we're planning a wedding. And the very first thing that I did was ask all of my bridesmaids to be in the wedding, because that was like one of the things I was most excited about. I had like three friends from back home, and then like some other friends from like undergrad and these other places. And everybody spread out all over the country. So I was like so excited to like have all the bridesmaids together. Kathy was kind of like the unofficial maid of honor, because we weren't doing like a maid of honor thing. Um, and I asked her immediately. This was like a week after she had visited, before I saw her devolve into deeper and deeper QAnon stuff, not knowing that it was going to get so much worse the way that it did. And, you know, I was like, Hillary Clinton isn't eating babies. And she replied back with something like, I can't believe you don't believe in child sex trafficking. That's awful. And I was just like, this is a text message. You can just reread what I wrote. Like, sex trafficking is a very real issue. I'm saying that Hillary Clinton's probably not eating babies. You know, like like just like this like one up, like always trying to get this just like completely detached from reality, moral supremacy. Um and eventually, uh after months of this, I had to uninvite Kathy from the wedding. I had to
Hmm.
just be like, please don't show up. And she took it very gracefully, to her credit. She was just like, yeah. Um, but when I figured out what QAnon was, I went to everybody with it, because my whole hometown is a small hometown in Florida. Um, Very insulated, very controlled sphere inside a very small town. So it's all white evangelicals. And the white evangelicals, for some reason, was the demographic that was overwhelmingly falling for these conspiracy theories. So I went to my two other bridesmaids from my hometown and I was like, I want to warn you about this. You're gonna start to see it. I want to pre-warn you about it. And one of them had already seen some stuff. She thought that Wayfair was shipping children, which was a conspiracy theory that hit in the summer of 2020, that really launched the hashtag Save the Children conspiracy theory, which this is one of the things that blood boils my blood the most, because you know, these sex trafficking conspiracy theories were causing measurable harm and distracting from legitimate law enforcement and charity organizations that were actually fighting the realistic elements of trafficking. Um,
Hmm.
but you know, she thought that Wayfair was shipping children, and I was like, nope. Uh, and she listened to me, and she thought that Oprah Winfrey was a pedophile, and I was
Oh,
like,
brother.
I was like, no, not based on this. And she listened to me, but her mother-in-law was the one who had sent her these videos. Her mother was the one who sent me the George Soros video. Her husband believed these things. Her sister-in-law believed these things. I was the only voice in her entire life that was saying no, and everyone else was like sending her a flood of this like misinformation. And
Hmm.
so, and I can't really blame her, for she did listen to me because she did, she respects me, but it wasn't enough. She still never got vaccinated for COVID. She didn't vaccinate her children. And it's heartbreaking. And my other bridesmaid, who I have, is the only person that I feel like I've actually made any kind of progress with, as far as the conspiracy theories and stuff go. Um, I gave her the same spiel. I was like, this is what QAnon is. You're going to start to see it. Like, be prepared. And she was just like, oh, I already know all about this. Her aunt, who is a woman that I have known my entire life, uh, she said, my aunt has locked herself in the house. Her adult children and her husband like cannot get her out of her office. She's constantly on her computer doing her own research. She went down the rabbit hole. Like, this is classic QAnon. And she told me that all of the hurricanes that hit Florida in 2020, and it's Florida, so we always have hurricanes. All the hurricanes that hit Florida in 2020 were man-made by Jewish space lasers with
Oh,
the
brother.
with the intent of sinking the state of Florida because DeSantis had given them too much freedom. And I guess the Jews didn't like that. So this is a woman that I have known my entire life. I had talked to 3 people, and I had barely scratched the surface, and I found immediately the most feral anti-Semitism that I had ever heard of in my entire life. And it still upsets me. I still just like Jewish space lasers. Um and and I talked to all of them, and I was like, yo, like, this is QAnon, like, that's insane, blah blah blah. And like, my friend with the aunt didn't believe any of that. She knew that it was crazy, but she couldn't understand or accept that it was important, or that it was, she thought that her aunt was just crazy and it's like this fringe thing. She didn't realize that it was like so anti-Semitic, and she didn't realize that it was connected to a much larger issue, and that a lot of people are believing this stuff. And I went to all of them and I was like, it's QAnon, they're on 8chan, blah, 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 blah. And like, not all of them, Kathy included, were like, we don't know what Q is. We don't know what 8chan is. They didn't even know what Reddit was.
Mm.
We don't know what you're talking about. Whatever you're talking about does not apply to us. And, even though I explained in detail how it did apply to them, they it just like they were just like, oh, I don't believe in Q, so that's not me. And I was like, okay, but you are talking about 5G radiation controlling your mind. So, and I went to my parents and I did the same thing. And my parents didn't really get into the hardcore QAnon stuff. They didn't get into like the child sex trafficking conspiracy theories and adrenochrome and all of that stuff, but they were very much on board for the anti-vax COVID denialist conspiracy theories. They were
Mm.
stockpiling hydroxychloroquine.
Oh,
My
brother.
dad, my dad has one lung. My father has one lung. He is over 65 years old and he is a cancer survivor. And they were stockpiling hydroxychloroquine. And I was like, if dad gets sick, like, he's probably not going to make it. And I'm in a different state and there's nothing I can do about it. And it was horrible. Um, and my mom is talking about Simone Gold and Judy Mikovits, who was, the star of the Plandemic documentary, which was like um, somebody's comment said, my husband's Jewish friend thought the space laser stuff was hilarious to the point of posting on his face. No. Fear my space lasers. Don't fear. Oh my God. They're going to believe it's true. If anybody does have a Jewish space laser, like, please just use it. Like, help. If we can sink the state of Florida, do it. um, but um, you know, my parents were not taking the appropriate controls, and they weren't. And the thing is that, like, they weren't making medical decisions. They weren't making
Hmm.
these decisions off of information, or that, you know, they had read the advisories and like whatever and made this decision. They were making these decisions based off of just made up nonsense, you know, saying that like the COVID numbers were fake and like people weren't actually dying, or that like, you know, all this stuff. And so I went to my brother. I have one sibling. It's my younger brother. He lives at home with my parents. And I was like, I reached out to him and I was like, we've got to do something. Like, mom and dad aren't taking this seriously. Like, what, can you help me? Like, you're home with them, I'm not. And he was just like, we should let the weak die.
Oh, wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Which is to date still one of the most evil things that I have ever heard anybody say. And I am, again, just beyond, I don't know what to do with this.
Hmm.
And you know, he said that the COVID numbers were fake, and that he was not going to get the vaccine, and just a whole bunch of like, I don't need medicine, like just nonsense. I was like, if you broke your arm, you would go to the doctor. Like, that's just so stupid. And um you know, so he was no help. And my parents were no help. And we were planning a wedding throughout all of this. And these were all of my bridesmaids. And this is what I was dealing with. And I uninvited Kathy. And we weren't sure we were going to get to have a wedding because of the pandemic. We were religiously tracking the numbers. And it got to the point we got very, very lucky. It just happened that our wedding was at the lowest point of Delta before Omicron had taken off, like right in the
Hmm.
sweet spot. At the time, we thought the vaccines were like 98% effective. The
Hmm.
wedding was outdoors, and nobody there was going to be over the age of 30. So we felt comfortable having the wedding. But I told my parents, I was like, you are going to be the only people there over the age of 30. Dad has one fucking lung. I'm giving you an ultimatum. We're not dictating that everybody has to get the vaccine, because 98% of the guests were going to do it on their own anyway, because they're not idiots. And I am dictating that like my parents have to get it. It wasn't, it didn't, I could never have a wedding, and like, I know the chances are low that something would happen to my dad. Like, the statistics are low, but if something bad happened to him, just so that I could throw a party when there were other things we could have done,
Hmm.
was senseless to me. And so I was like, you guys have to get vaccinated. And my mom told me to cancel the wedding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She was just like, you should just elope. Um, Cancel the whole thing. And I and I was like, no, 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 no. My dad, I don't think that he didn't really think that he needed the vaccine, but he knew that it was important to me, and I think that he realized that um, it would be a big deal if my mom canceled the wedding.
Hmm.
And so he spent 3 days talking her into getting the vaccine. And they did get vaccinated, and we did get to have the wedding. But you can imagine that it wasn't super pleasant for me.
Hmm.
Instead of worrying about like the color of the spoons and what shape to fold the napkins into, I was worried about somebody talking about Jewish space lasers to my in-laws.
Hmm.
So like, it was stressful. And then immediately after the wedding, um, our wedding was in October, the end of October. Christmas of that year, so 2021, we were visiting my husband's family, and they're all normal.
Normal.
Yeah, they're all highly intelligent, very like successful people. And his poor sister, his sister hosted Christmas. They just had this gorgeous new home. It was they had their first baby. um Sorry, my best friend from the army fell down this ideological black hole. I'm pretty sure he was on the I knew like one person from that slightly Pentecostal church that I went to in undergrad was a January 6th. I hadn't spoken to him in years and years, but I did see it on social media. But
You have a question here from Mark
Ooh,
Caesar with regards to your wedding. Did your parents put much money into the wedding? Did they have a sort of implied authority over the
so
wedding?
that was another thing that was very difficult because, and I saw, and just knowing my parents' personality, because they're very control, like my mother especially is very controlling. They did give us money for the wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and but I told her like from the beginning, I was like, um, this doesn't mean that you get to decide everything. If the strings to this money are that you're in charge, then you can keep it. But like, and this was the thing of like, I didn't want to burn every bridge. I'm their only daughter. I knew it was a big deal to my mom that we have a wedding and that like they be involved and that but I had to have a private conversation with my dad beforehand, and I didn't know how bad it was going to get. I did not know that like the anti-vax conspiracy theory stuff was going to get as bad as it was. Like months before that, I had a conversation with my dad, and I was just like, if you want to give us money for this, I want you to write me a check now, lump sum, so that you're not, we're not holding this purse strings, so that we don't spend money that we don't have,
Mm-hmm.
and then mom say that she's not going to pay, and if you don't want to give us the money, then like that's fine. So they did contribute to the wedding. And my mother tried, she wanted to have it in my hometown. She wanted to have it in her yard, and I was just like, we're not doing that. My hometown is like an anti-vax conspiracy hole. I'm not inviting people there. It's 2 hours from the nearest airport, and 90% of the guests are traveling in, so that's inconvenient. And yeah, so she, at one point she literally floated the idea of having the wedding at the Miami Trump Tower.
Oh, brother. Oh, my goodness.
I was like, I can't believe that you actually said that out loud to me. Like, like, the fact that like you would even suggest that just shows how completely detached from reality you are. So there was regular wedding drama slash mixed with this weird like QAnon wedding drama, and the whole thing was basically awful. Um, but
Okay. I'm going to stop you there for a couple of reasons. Number one, I've got a question that I've been holding for quite some time that goes all the way back to when you were talking about the Demon Bar. Question is, was the Demon Bar the most popular bar in town?
it was there's only 3 bars, so actually they were all pretty fairly equally popular, but yeah. Oh, yeah, no.
And second, we are getting close to the end of time and we haven't gotten to your deconstruction yet. So
I'll
let's go ahead and skip up to your deconstruction.
Yeah, so it was this Christmas. This is
Okay.
the I deconstructed December 24th, 2021, like the date, because my sister in law, she had a new house, she had a new baby. It was her first time hosting Christmas. It was this big deal, and I'm having a full blown minty bee, like because I got 2 text messages on the 23rd and the 24th from people who do not know each other, a guy from work and a guy from undergrad, or my friend from undergrad, and they said almost verbatim the same exact text message. And it was, I'm home for Christmas. My dad is saying some crazy QAnon stuff. What do I do?
Mm.
And like my
Hmm.
my undergrad friend, her dad like wouldn't get the booster because he thought it was the mark of the beast, like that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. I've been dealing with this for like a year or 2 years now, and I've not been successful. Like I can tell you what's happening, but I can't tell you what to do about it. And it just felt so overwhelmingly unfair that this was now affecting other people in my life that I like love and respect. And I knew that it was a bigger issue. I knew that it wasn't just my family and it wasn't just my hometown, but when I saw that it was affecting other people that I knew, I snapped, like a physical snap, Christmas Eve, of finally realizing that they believed these things because they are white evangelicals. It is because of the faith that I am a part of that they are falling for these insane ideas. What is
Hmm.
wrong? You will know a false prophet by their fruit, and the fruit immediately that I saw was the fruit of this conspiracy theory, anti-vax, horrible stuff. And then the first thing that and at this point, so I didn't have the language of deconstruction, evangelical. I didn't know that there were shows like yours, or that there were resources or books. And so I was very much adrift for a long time. It took me about a year to get my feet under me again. I eventually found TikTok influencers and people who were talking about this, like April LaJoy and Lacey Bean, and book recommendations. And then I started reading a bunch of books, and basically confirmed that the reason that they fell for all the why the white evangelicals overwhelming, if you look at the statistics, the more white Christian nationalist you are, a linear relationship of you are more likely to believe in QAnon and voter fraud and anti-vax and like all this stuff. It was because they're white Christian nationalist. I was able to put a language to it, learn what white Christian nationalism is. And the thing that really like broke open, gave me the language the most, was when I found like cult psychology. Dr. Robert J. Lifton, Yanya Lalich, Stephen Hassan, and Margaret Singer, all of these psychologists, sociologists, psychiatrists who studied cults and things going back to like the Moonies. Stephen Hassan was in the Moonies. Dr. Robert J. Lifton was studying the prisoners of thought reform prisons in communist China. The language of cults finally kind of explained it for me. And when you're talking about this, the bite model, somebody commented that Stephen Hassan's model, they have lots of different models, lots of different language, depends on who you talk to. A lot of experts don't like to use the word cult because it's so socially stigmatized. And when I say cult, I mean like a traditional destructive cult, like Jonestown or Heaven's Gate, or these horrible stories that end in like mass suicide or murder and all this stuff. They have a charismatic leader, a transcendent belief system, a system of control, and a system of influence. That's one definition. That's not white Christian nationalism. White Christian nationalism is not a traditional destructive cult. It doesn't exactly fit. But what cults do is that they have a totalistic ideology. That's Dr. Robert J. Lifton's term, an absolute worldview. And you view the world through a very biased lens. And you center the veneration of that totalistic ideology on your charismatic leader. But you can have a totalistic ideology without the charismatic leader that is not a part of a traditional destructive cult. So white Christian nationalism is a totalistic ideology. And that's like what, 1940s communist China was. This is what we see with like populism and fascism and the large scale political movements. And that's what white Christian nationalism is in the United States today. But when you have this highly biased worldview, it produces what Yanya Lalich called bounded choice, or what Dr. Robert J. Lifton called personal closure, which is basically, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy who wrote Sherlock Holmes, has a quote where he says, once you have eliminated all of the impossible options, whatever's left, no matter how
Improbable.
improbable it is, must be the truth. And when you have this biased worldview, you've eliminated part of reality as impossible. And so whatever's left, however, is now just improbable. It's bounded choices. And so Jewish space lasers are now just improbable. Why did Trump lose the 2020 election? The idea that the majority of Americans don't want to live in a misogynistic, homophobic, racist theocracy is not one of the bounded choices. It must be because of satanic tampering. Why did Trump try to pull out of the UN and NATO and all of these international peace treaties and things? From the totalistic ideology of white Christian nationalism, it must be a part of the end times narrative and this one world order. And so you cannot separate this cult psychology from conspiracy theory psychology. People believe conspiracy theories for the same reason they join cults, which is to fulfill social and psychological needs. And people who fall for these things are not, and this is a big fallacy for this, they're not fundamentally flawed. They're not idiots. They're not I called them idiots earlier, but I get frustrated, but they're just normal people. All of the cult experts agree that everyone is susceptible to these thought reform programs at different positions in their life, depending on how it's presented to them. They're looking for solutions to either personal or existential problems, and this group or this ideology is presenting an oversimplified, easy solution. And so, and you don't even have to be going through like a negative life change. It's more likely during divorce or bankruptcy or something, but it could be something just like moving. You don't have any friends in a new area, and they use what Robert J. Lifton calls, he has 8 characteristics of thought reform, which is essentially unethical, manipulative tactics to get you to adopt a totalistic ideology. And so, white evangelical churches, they're not cults, but they still use thought reform tactics,
Mm-hmm.
these unethical, manipulative, tactics like loading the language and mystic manipulation, and he has like 8 of them. And they prey on our pre-existing evolutionary biases, like our logical fallacies, like the logical fallacy of intention bias, agency bias, teleological mindset.
They also prey on people who are at their lowest. They
Yeah,
specifically target people who are going through a hard time.
and I that is, people join cults or believe conspiracy theories and things when they're going through a negative life change. They're looking for like some sort of answer. But it's also worth noting, and I think that this is also very much paralleled in the white evangelical church, that cults they don't like somebody who's too damaged. If you have too much like mental health issues or whatever, substance abuse issues or whatever, you become a liability instead of an asset, because they're just looking to exploit you either for financial or labor or like whatever other thing. And you do see the same exact thing in the evangelical church. They're there to help, but like at a certain point, you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps.
Mm-hmm. Well, we are out of time. Um, and I think this all sounds very fascinating. And I don't want to give people too much anyway, because when the book comes out, we want everyone to go ahead and buy a copy of the book. So you've heard some of Cynane's story. And if you want to hear the rest, when the book is ready and is out, you can all buy a copy and hear the rest of the story.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. The last thing I would like to plug is I have a website. The important part of it, and the thing that I like would really love if it could help somebody, is the resource page. I have every book that I have, neurotically and obsessively read since my deconstruction,
Mhm.
broken down by different like categories on if you have questions about conspiracy theories or cults or, LGBTQ, biblical inerrancy, like whatever. So if you're looking for your next book, takingoffthetinfoilhat.com has the resource page.
Okay. Mark Caesar asked, is there a pre-order link for the book? No, there is not. The book is not, Cynane is still writing the book,
Yeah.
and so it's not at the pre-order stage. But there is a link in the description to Cynane's webpage. And the resources that she just mentioned are all on the webpage there. Okay, and one thing that I would like to plug is next week's guest will be the Lone Wanderer. She also has a book that is coming out soon, and there will be links to be able to pre-order her book, which is coming out very soon. And also, Jeff Godless Scummer will be on. He has a new series on history, and he's going to be telling us a little bit about what he is doing with his history series. So that's what's coming up on my channel next week. And with that, Cynane, thank you so much for coming. It has been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
And thank you to everyone in the chat and everyone watching this in the future. Live your life.